some visuals on potential options for community benefits and public benefits based on a landfill in the St. Louis area. So at the request of the task force, we're looking at comparable landfills and trying to understand what the options are for the Front Range landfill. Oops. Meeting objectives. So I'll go through the public comments that were recently submitted. We have 3, and I like to summarize those for you all and check to make sure your reflections are captured as well. We'll talk about the hauling routes. We'll talk about the potential expansion. And then, like I mentioned, community benefits. Our project team will introduce each other. David Frank is here somewhere, likely greeting folks at the door. David is the Director of Environmental Services. Erica Thorley is the Sustainability Manager. Erica is joining us on the phone as well. And Gabby is the wizard in the back room working all the technology magic and the Director of Communications and Community Engagement for the town. So really wonderful town partners here. We have 2 folks from Waste Connections. We have Mark Adams, Engineering Manager, and Randy Torville, the District Manager. And if you've been with us before, they offer kind of complementary perspectives about landfill operations, and we like to rope them into our discussions too. So thank you both for being here. And Dalton Ellis has been here in the past, Region Engineer. And are you with the town? Are you the?
I'm John Ferrucci, Manager of Transportation and Mobility and Public Works.
Wonderful, John, and newly at the town.
That
right?
is correct.
So here, great. Well, we will try and find some good questions for you. Transportation is a big piece of the work that the task force is doing. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Task force roster. I'd like Lisa to introduce yourself. We'll go down the table and then we'll move to Scott and Cheryl.
Sure. I'm Lisa Huff. I'm representing Erie Highlands.
I'm Michael Howard. I'm also representing Erie Highlands.
I'm Chris, and I am the Rena neighborhood.
Hi, Jeff Deacon, Vista Bridge.
And Cassie Yale, Vista Point.
Great, thank you. I've been asked to remind you to speak into your microphone, so use what you got, speak into the microphone. I know we have folks joining on the phone too. Like I mentioned, welcome to members of the public and your continued commitment to just stay engaged and involved. I love having you here. It keeps us really aware that people are closely watching this and very interested and concerned or excited about different things. If you have public comments you'd like to share, find a clipboard, write those down and send those to Colin. He'll transcribe those for us. We have beverages and cookies too. Public restrooms are open. They're over there. And speak into your mics, which I shared already. Participation guidelines. These are important to us because our role as facilitator is to make sure we all have an equal voice, that your voice is heard, and that you get a safe space to share that with a focus on what the interests of the community are. So we'll all remain open-minded. We interact respectfully. We'll stay on track with our agenda. We will participate in an active and focused manner. We'll share our values, views, interests, not our positions. And I'll remind you if you're speaking to a position and I'll ask you to get to your interests, we'll work through that. We'll listen actively. We'll try to understand each other. We'll avoid repetition and revisiting resolved issues. I'd like to just pause on this one. We moved past the entrance route recommendation. We will revisit it when you are all faced with a draft set of recommendations to look and comment on. If we start going back into the entrance, I'll hold that for our 6th or 7th meeting. No, 5th or 6th meeting. Today, we're really focused on routes. We're focused on the land use issues and hopefully community benefits and provide clear and specific recommendations. So you've heard me ask you, what does that look like? What are the the community's interests that could be translated into a recommendation for what's best for the town and to help Waste Connections honor their commitment to be a good neighbor. So thank you for bearing with me. These are important to keep us all working toward those recommendations. Quickly, we had 3 action items from the 3rd meeting. One was to review the routes used by heavy trucks coming in from the west to the Front Range landfill and look for potential alternate routes. We have that information in the slide deck. Hi, David. Hello. Contact the facilitation team with information requests, inform the landfill expansion and land swap discussion. Many of you did that. And then the last was identify community concerns about the landfill expansion and land swap and report back to the facilitation team. So we'll discuss that today. I'll pause. Any questions about the action items? Everyone have a chance to review what we'll go through today? So we are committed to looking and reviewing and reading and understanding the public comments that come through on the website and in person as well. And I share those at the beginning of every meeting to make sure that we are again honoring one of our commitments to read and understand those. So the 3 comments we got, I'll summarize them. One was a question about whether there's a left turn lane into the existing entrance, and I think that's something that's on the table and within our recommendations. The second was a concern that expansion could potentially lead to more odors, health risks, traffic pollution. We've heard that reflected as well. So an individual named Al sent that in. And the third was just in regards to potential land swap, land expansion, you know, what the notification process is with different partners that would be involved in that work, a support for road protections, and really a question that I don't have an answer to, but does the size of the landfill shrink over time as waste decays? So not to get us too off track, but I don't know. Sure, very briefly. Yeah, please, Mark, yeah. A little bit about outside of our process, but it's a curious question. And here comes Mark Adams.
I should have been ready.
And well, Mark, I'll have you present the next 3 slides, maybe with Randy too, so you're in a good spot.
Okay. So the answer to the question is yes. There's a lot of factors, so I'm not going to go into that.
Thank you.
But generally, a landfill like this would settle about 2 feet per year, typically. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, based on a variety of factors. At some stage during post-closure, so after it's been inactive for a while, that rate of settlement reduces. But for the first 15, 20 years after the landfill's closed, one can expect some measurable settlement. But it doesn't turn the landfill into a flat piece of ground. But there is measurable settlement in the order of 2 feet per year.
I think that's helpful. We've had conversations around view sheds and views from homes, and Peggy Klein asked this. So Peggy, if you're listening, hopefully that answered your question. Oh, it's Peggy. I'm so glad you're here. All right.
Do we have time for other public comments or questions, or should we wait till the end?
From members of the public?
I'm a member of the public,
Oh,
right?
from you. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, reflections on the comments, anything to add? Yeah.
I just have a reflection on the process, in that, and Gabby, if you're listening, I got a newsletter today from a sustainability newsletter from the town. And I was just thinking that would be an excellent place to solicit more public comments at some point, to have a notification to remind people that we do have that link on the website and information about the task force. So I thought it would fit well in the sustainability newsletter.
I think that's a great idea. I'll get that added next time.
Thanks.
And we haven't decided on the process to get community feedback on the recommendations. And my sense was once council looks at recommendations, and that's a normal due process, but at least informing people that recommendations are coming later.
Well, I think informing them that if they have comments about the landfill, that's a good place to collect them and notify people.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
Yep.
Did you have other comments? Anyone else? Okay, we're gonna get into route, and we have 3 slides. One is revisiting this slide on current routes to the Front Range landfill. Then we have just a reminder of some information around the split between residential hauling and routes that are coming in from Boulder or other places. And then Waste Connections is prepared kind of a recommendation for you all to consider that is consistent with our discussions to date. So with that, anything you want to add on the current conditions, Mark, for this slide?
No, but we can answer any questions if there's a
Yeah.
lack of clarity here.
So primary access points, Erie Parkway, State Highway 7, which is Arapahoe up to a point, and I-25. So, and up through Sheridan and 4 over to County Road 5. You know, we've looked at this, we've talked through it. in between the last meeting and today? Anything else to add or any kind of concerns, opportunities you've been thinking about?
Michael Howard here. Just was curious, I was looking at some of these routes and was thinking about the people coming from Vista Ridge for the high school students and stuff that are driving. And some of these proposed routes are sending majority of the traffic down south, County Road 5 and County Road 7 instead of up north on County Road, from across 4 and then up 5. Does having more of the trucks turning left across County Road 5 cause more of,
Hmm.
danger to the students than just following the trucks while they're, traversing? I'm not sure if that's just something I was thinking about the other
So the
day. so I
concern,
wanted
are
to-
you, and that's okay if you are you thinking a couple slides forward with the
Yeah,
red
I'm
bubbles? Yeah.
Sorry if
No, that's okay.
jumping ahead.
Student safety, kind of the school related transportation. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll move on. I want to get to the discussion around the next slide. Anything else on here? As a reminder, about 65% of trucks accessing the Front Range landfill are account holders, customers of Waste Connections. 35% are members of the public. Waste Connections requires that landfill account holders use specific routes when accessing the landfill, prohibits haulers from using the local community roads. Violators are recorded and there has been prevented from accessing the landfill. The second point here, haulers picking up and delivering waste in surrounding communities can use the roadways in those communities. So that's the distinction we named many times, is there's still going to be hauling traffic to pick up residential waste in some of those areas that we've identified as more sensitive. So just keeping that top of mind and acknowledging that. And then this is what, Mark, if you're willing, I was going to ask you to speak to, and the proposed restricted routes to an extent and suggested ones.
Yeah, maybe I should explain the colors.
Yep.
So that the squiggly red stuff is supposed to denote the areas that we want to restrict or eliminate customer traffic. So that would be down Sheridan and then across on County Road 4, and then ultimately the trucks would go up 5. Then obviously any traffic through that Ranch Eggs community, that's denoted as a long stretch of red, if you like, all the way up from State Highway 7 up to the County Road 6 intersection. And then County Road 6 also east of that intersection of County Road 7 and 6. So those are, I think we've characterized that correctly based on the feedback that we've received from the public and the task force. Those are areas that are highlighted as areas that I think make a lot of sense to restrict or eliminate customer traffic. The green is intended to represent proposed primary hauling customer routes. So that would mean much of the traffic would come off of I-25 across on Erie Parkway down 7 and then onto 6. And then a decision, I suppose, or recommendation is coming later as to whether it makes sense for the entrance facility to be on 6 or remain on 5. And then the reason we showed another green route proceeding sort of north-south on County Road 5 from the high school, as Michael was pointing out, is maybe it makes sense for whatever vehicles are going east, and then after they've been loaded, I guess, west on Erie Parkway. Does it make sense for them to go across that intersection to County Road 7, or does it make sense for them to go straight down 5? That's more of a safety and traffic engineering question, I think, that I'm not qualified to answer, but that's why that's there. It's specifically for the Erie Parkway traffic that's coming in from the west. That makes sense. The other thing that you'll note is that, we've talked about this fair bit western waste hauling from Boulder. That's the purple. What we're suggesting there is that they don't go down Sheridan, but instead they route to 25, go up 25 and come in like everybody else. So that's what this essentially reflects.
Scott, Cheryl, you're on the phone with us. Any questions or comments on the map you see, the red bubbles, the proposed routes?
Well, this is only for those that he has accounts with, correct? So that still means independent haulers that are bringing in like yard waste or people that are tearing out driveways and that kind of thing are still going to come in whichever way they want, correct?
The 35% of,
Well, we can, depends on what features and signage the town of Erie wants to put in to restrict that traffic. But the intention is that it restricts them as well, all customers, not just customers that have an account, but all customers. And Scott, you're right. I mean, the devil's in the details of how we make that happen through communication from the landfill, through road signage and road improvements. But we're trying to address all the traffic, except obviously that traffic that might be doing yard waste in the local community, for instance. Obviously, that's different.
and
I'm more referring to like the independent, the roofers that have a King Hall trailer behind a 3/4 ton pickup or a 1 ton pickup that they're coming in. They come in whichever way right now, correct?
well, is that still members of the public? Is that the 30? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
The bigger
that
loads.
at this point, but for, specific interactions that Randy, has with neighbors on County Road 6 and Ranch Eggs, people will, essentially go whatever route. And the notion here is to come up with a road improvement signage and enforcement plan that really defines primary routes for everybody, whether you're an independent or
If
not.
we're taking the semis off of Sheridan, that's going to make a lot of Vista Ridge people very happy.
That's what we're running with here. I see nods, but I think that's the game plan.
And Mark, I didn't want you to lonely up here.
Oh,
The town is certainly willing to help with signage, et cetera, to delineate the preferred route. But those 35% of landfill customers, which are members of the public, at the end of the day, these are public roads. And similarly to on your way to the airport, obviously the city and county of Denver has delineated the way they want you to go. A lot of times I still take Tower. That's not the preferred route to the airport, but as a member of the public, it is my right to drive those roads.
Would you have to talk to Broomfield at all about, because are part of those in Broomfield's jurisdictions?
Yes, specifically the bits to the south, and also Weld County would probably have to be involved as well.
Yeah.
Coordinating that signage. So yeah, from the town's perspective, what we're hoping from the task force is some broad recommendations, right? Signage should be pursued, and we'll work through the intergovernmental nastiness. Nobody likes watching the sausage get made, so we'll do that on our own time.
Well, but thank you, David. And I'll say it again. I want that to be captured in the recommendations if we need to, some of the concerns, but we're not going to solve that today. And
Is the landfill still willing to monitor trash along Sheridan and some of the other routes? And even though it's not their haulers, that some of them are coming in with uncovered loads, obviously, because they're not subject to the same restrictions. Would you guys keep doing what you're already doing?
well, Randy's going to come up. Yeah.
Randy.
Or Randy, there's a seat next to Colin too, if you want to sit down.
Just to let you know, those roads would be patrolled no matter what we do traffic wise. The surrounding roads, which would be County Road 6, County Road 7, Sheridan, County Road 4 and County Road 5, and even up to Erie Parkway. We patrol those roads and we would continue no matter who come down those roads, because we know we can't stop everybody in the public, and you're gonna have small trailers, pickup trucks. Some people do a good job of covering their loads and other people don't. But we would
Great, thank you.
pick those up.
Thanks, Randy. So hearing about the coordination broadly, this can't cover everyone, but does it relieve some of the burden, especially on Erie Parkway and State Highway 7, and then those 3 other sensitive areas, which we haven't quite named, but for folks who've been here or not, it's up Sheridan, west on 4th and up 5th. That's an area we're staying away from. It's to honor the current agreement through the Ranch Eggs neighborhood. So that Ranch Eggs neighborhood agreement up 7. And state or county road 6 between I-25 and 7. Oh my gosh.
Someday we'll get creative with our road names, but it won't be today.
So those are the areas in the red bubbly. And again, I'm just sharing something we all know, and that is the reality. There will be hauling traffic, whether it's a member of the public or a customer. There will be trash trucks through neighborhoods, serving those neighborhoods. There will be traffic hauling or not on Arapahoe, State Highway 7, on Erie Parkway. What can we do that best represents the interests of the community in terms of balancing, but also thinking about ways to relieve some of the burden that kind of you're feeling and you've all reflected. So that's my spiel.
Morgan, can I speak now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, 'cause I don't have a way to raise my hand on this iPad. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. We can
Is it okay? Okay. So the questions that I had, Randy was just saying that they're going to be patrolling those roads. Is this something that Erie PD can also enforce? Can they ticket people for being on those roads?
I don't want to speak for PD, but unless there's a specific ordinance or code being violated, probably not. Again, those are public roads
Okay.
and are accessible to the public at large.
Okay. Okay, so basically probably not. And then I have a question. You were talking.
Let me stop you because it's not that we're brushing it aside or that the town, it's that right now we don't have a great answer, but that can be recorded in the recommendations that, the task force would like to attach some kind of enforcement to the recommendation. So it's not gone, but.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you.
And I appreciate the question. It is just a bit far enough outside of my department that I don't want to speak for the law enforcement community and what they are willing to adopt into code and enforce.
Okay.
But
All right.
it's
Fair enough.
we can talk.
Okay. And then the next question that I have, you were talking about David stuff being in the budget as far as I guess signage and stuff. We've been talking about the intersection of Road 6 and Road 7, talking about diverters and different things like that. At this point, who would be paying for all of that? Because does Erie own the roads in that intersection? So would this be Erie's expense, or would this be Waste Connections, or is this going to be shared, or how is that going to happen?
I think we'd work through the details of the funding mechanisms, whether it would be part of the fees already paid to the town, or if it would be some cost sharing agreement. There's a lot that would have to go into the engineering and design and feasibility of that. So I don't want to get too far down that road. No pun intended. But I think it's the task of the task force. Oh man, to provide guidance and recommendation to Waste Connections and the town, and again, we'll work out what's in the realm of possibility and how that gets done.
Well, and
Okay.
Cheryl, one thing I've heard you mention in a variety of, or just kind of an underlying theme in a variety of, is kind of the teeth of the recommendations and the accountability and the commitment, how to make sure that we're not making promises, but promises are honored and the commitments are honored. So I just want to echo that. And that again can be recorded.
Right. Yeah. Just because the minute somebody puts in, if the entrance gets changed to 6, that stretch of 6 goes all the way to State Highway 85. So it's quite a distance out there, and people are gonna pull it up on their GPS and see that, oh, the entrance is on 6. So that's why I guess we're pretty vigilant about making sure that there's some way other than the signs to keep us safe. And then on that topic, I'm not sure whether I'm getting ahead of myself, but the things that I saw about the traffic going down road, so like the proposed thing, don't have anybody going down Sheridan Parkway anymore. I did have a question as to how many pieces of traffic, because if there was 45% of the traffic coming from the landfill, coming from the south, and if it's going to get rerouted, does that mean that 45% is the Boulder company that's going to go down Road 7 then? Is that what you guys are going to do as far as informing your clients?
That sounds like that's the intent.
Okay. Then my next question is,
Carol, 1 second. Mark, anything to add to?
Only that today the majority of the traffic comes down from the north, but Western in particular, I don't know about STS today. Yeah.
All recycling will come up 7.
Yeah, so there's 3 companies that bring these larger transfer trailers in. They would, instead of going down Sheridan, they would be coming in from, I-25 and then down 7.
okay, so that's Western, we going down I-25 and then down 7. Who's going to be in charge of doing like the environmental studies and the safety? Because there's 8 residents that live on that stretch, and half of them have children that are going to be going to school or already attending school, and a school bus is already stopping there. So I'm thinking as far as the safety, because their mailboxes are across the street, the school buses need to stop and the children need to safely board the buses. The other thing is the environmental impact, because this is an active dairy farm, and that Frico ditch does carry on right across 7. So in case people don't know, goes north where we saw it when we toured the landfill, and then it cuts across right about where the dairy farm is. And if you have traffic, and that big majority of traffic is now coming down 7, one of the things I thought about, and I just feel that it's important to speak up and say that we need to be aware of it and need to do something to do environmental studies on, is the noise pollution, the air pollution, and if there's pollution from vehicles, if there's stuff leaking, I don't know, oils or whatever liquids could possibly be leaking from all those vehicles coming down Road 7. And are they going to, because right now there's a lot of barrel ditches there, so are they going to expand that and fill in those barrel ditches and stuff too? That's what I'm just wondering about, is keeping those people safe.
So Cheryl, things I've heard you mention are the diverters, which I know when Miguel was here, he, or even offline with you, suggested. So diverters to, keep people safe, enforcement, and just concerns about, again, like the teeth of these recommendations, and then sound engineering and studies with an eye on public safety for people of all ages and everyone along the road. Anything else before?
Also the animals, because that's an active working dairy farm. So yeah, the animals, because if there's toxins that are going into the soil and it's draining into that irrigation ditch, which they are, it's just kind of like the cycle of life. So they're using the irrigation water to grow their fields, which in turn gets fed to their dairy cows. Dairy cows produce the milk, which we give to our children and we consume. So I just wanted to make sure that we are very, very on top of that, and making sure that environmental wise, we're not doing anything that's potentially harmful to any residents or anybody.
So if the monitoring that Waste Connections is not already doing doesn't cover that, then that can be captured in the recommendations.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. Michael, I know you got ahead of your skis and moved on to this map before we're ready, but we're ready now. Do you want to continue with kind of your thoughts on, I've heard you just mention a lot about Erie Parkway and some concerns around school transportation. Anything else to share? I mean, how does this land with you?
Oh, no, this landing fine. I was just thinking, by transitioning, if you have 45% of your traffic going And students, we've been worried about students driving County Road 5 to the high school from Vista Bridge in the neighborhood south of the landfill. That is it. If they're just following a trash truck or a transfer trailer, is that safer than if they have to deal with a transfer trailer crossing the road, you know, in a left-hand turn across? And so if you said if you had 45% more traffic, so, you know, 200 more vehicles going south, you know, obviously not at the same time, not during the same periods, but does that create more traffic mitigation issues or traffic dangers? I don't know. It's just something that came to my mind. And if you're worried about safety, we gotta look at those aspects as well.
Is there a left-hand turn coming south on 5 to 6?
Well, not a left turn lane, no.
Left, sorry, left turn lane, thank you.
There isn't. But they're either gonna, at the current entrance, they're making a left turn. Right? If they're coming down from the high school, they will make a left turn into the facility.
May I ask a
Or.
sort
or
of a
they'll make
clarifying
a-
question on that?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, don't worry. So you're envisioning STS and Western are taking the purple route on 7 up I-25 and then driving west on Erie Parkway.
And then down 7.
So
So they wouldn't
it-
go as far as the high
Okay,
school.
they wouldn't make it to 5.
Yep, got
The
it.
orange line is
Mhm.
primarily local and small carriers. That's not, you're not envisioning that
Exactly.
as the big
It's
transfer
for
trucks.
the pre-existing traffic, Michael, that's already on Erie Parkway, that actually today does exactly that. They just come down 5. But the point is a good one.
Yes.
Which is whether you're, I think, and this is one of the questions that was brought up on the, that you
Mhm.
referred to earlier, is are we going to do a left-hand dedicated left turn lane? I think the answer is yeah, under both situations, we have to,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
If you're turning onto 6 from 5 or turning into the landfill from 5, I think the responsible thing to do is to have a left turn lane. So it then just comes down to what makes most sense for the entrance location.
Can I ask a question while we're talking about the only 2 entrances? Is it okay if I, because I'm sorry, Margaret, I don't have a way to raise my hand.
No, I don't change what you're doing. That's how I know you want to talk. So but I have 2 things to quickly clarify. The concern about the perceived at this point safety concern around taking a left onto 6 from 5. And what I heard, which we hadn't really shared before, was regardless of where the entrance is, there would be a left-hand turn lane, you know.
I think whether we're paying for it, whether the town's paying for it, it's something that we should include, that I would suggest the task force include in recommendations.
Okay.
Morgan,
Yeah.
I'm thinking too along Erie Parkway,
Mhm.
is there a left-hand turn lane coming off Erie Parkway to turn onto 7?
Yes.
I think there is. Is it an arrow controlled?
Is it?
Okay.
There
And then
already
I'm
is.
thinking also how long is it? Because if we'll have all the semis in that lane, that's like one
Wait,
of the
Cassie,
main
tell me
ways.
again where you're
Okay,
thinking
John,
about.
look at it.
Between I-25 and.
Mhm.
Hold on, let's.
Because almost like now it sounds like close to 100% of the traffic's gonna be coming in off of 25
Okay, so off of
onto Erie
Erie
Parkway
the left onto 7.
and turning left onto
And that's
7.
a signalized
Correct.
intersection. Okay, John? Cheryl, we haven't forgotten about you. Let us get through this and then we'll move on. Yeah.
Yeah.
John?
I appreciate the question. When it comes to the design of roadways and how left turn pockets are designed for intersections, for signalized intersections, there are a number of factors that go into the design process. So you could have longer left turn pockets that handle the capacity of dual left turn lanes. And a lot of that comes down to the signal timing. There are factors that can be built into a signal, like the one we're talking about, to be able to have a lead or lag left turn movement. And you may have noticed this in other places when you're driving. You get a green arrow before others, but it's in the opposing directions. And then if there's a lot of volume in one particular direction, the left turn arrow may come on twice as a lead and a lag to the cycle phasing that happens at that intersection. The length of the left turn lane, that is typically designed using a number of features, including engineering standards and the percentage of truck traffic that happens. So yes, it could be adjusted, but the way it's currently designed, it does accommodate the traffic that currently exists. Over time, it's reevaluated as there's more development activity, more projects and other things that come online that help tell us that information about where are we at for a decision related to that traffic signal and a left turn pocket.
Thank you, John.
Oh, and John is our traffic and mobility division manager, if he didn't introduce himself.
And coming in hot with the technical language, I like it. Yeah. My partner's a transportation planner, so I feel like I'm at home. All right, sorry. Cheryl, go ahead.
Mute myself. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're thinking about, one of the goals was to keep all the traffic off of Sheridan Parkway, and I understand why that is. But once again, I said this at the last meeting, and if someone can help me, because this is up to us to be brainstorming this stuff. If the goal was that, I mean, it's right here in the notes from meeting 3, that Waste Connections stated that the primary goal in relocating the entrance is to move as much heavy traffic as possible away from the neighborhoods and other sensitive areas such as Erie High. But yet I had said that I had a big concern about sending all of the traffic down Road 7, but now we're talking about safety of the high school. So it almost sounds, and then Mark said that it wasn't good. He didn't advise us to go down to one entrance into the landfill, but it just looks like this is all right here. This is going to be happening. This is the proposed alternate routes that eventually when those new housing go in on Road 5, that's going to get shut down because they're going to say it's too dangerous. So what's going to happen? We're all going to end up going down Road 7 because we went from 3 to 2, then we're going to end up going down to 1.
What's your concern with this? Is that a lot of traffic is being diverted from
Well, I'm just,
Highway 7 to County Road 7?
yeah, in the safety of it, the volume of it. But even like Mark said, it wasn't wise to just have one way in. And I know at the last meeting, Cassie and Scott both spoke up and said they didn't want everything going down 7. But it just kind of looks like that's what's all in the plans.
State Highway 7 or County Road, Cheryl?
Going down Erie Parkway and then south on 7.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, as far as community wise, there's a lack of water, there's fire hazards, there's just so many things to consider safety wise if we're just going to make one way in and one way out, especially when Mark has said that he does not recommend that.
So clarify how, if are there going to be 2 entrances? Is it 1? And then what's Waste Connections' response to
We're
diverting
showing-
some of that traffic on
We're
7?
showing 2 routes coming in from the north. But what this is suggesting is that most of the traffic, which would be coming in off of I-25, would be going down County Road 7 and then going across 6 to the west.
Okay.
Are they gonna, John, do you have that in your plans as well, right? As far as addressing that intersection, because there's been a lot of detail talk about making left turns. What about that intersection? Because there've been fatalities in the last 27 years. I've seen stuff. We've had power outages because of it. You guys are going to make sure that you're going to have all of that extra turning lanes and everything to keep things safe from making that turn onto the intersection. Because the other thing too is I'm kind of wondering, does Erie want the gateway to Erie coming off of I-25? The first thing they're going to see is big staging areas.
We're gonna
I'm bringing that up. Think about
the alternate routes. Those concerns are, I wrote them down, Cheryl, and I don't think we need to get too much further into your point, John, that based on traffic studies and flows and decrease in traffic, the timing of these signals is adjusted. So we hear that, Cheryl. I want to make sure we all get a chance. So Cass.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Cheryl.
I was just wondering, they're not gonna come off I-25 and just take County Road 7 north, don't you think? It just seems like, I know it's the RENA agreement and everything, but that's one of the
So you're
worries.
concerned
Yeah.
that with a lack of enforcement or restrictions or kind of consequences for customers coming in.
If
Yeah.
I may, I think that's where it's kind of our job to make that recommendation. I think the suggestion that I've heard is that for 65% of the traffic, give or take, that can be enforced by Waste Connections. Because if they see their haulers coming in on an inappropriate route, they can take action. For the remainder, it would be our recommendation to create the IGAs to do adequate signage to indicate that the preferred front door is this route. And, that's a
Yeah.
big flashing sign saying no landfill traffic, and, cops won't enforce that unless there's.
Yeah, and a lot of the signs are down
Mhm.
half there or, broken.
What Cheryl's mentioning, and Chris, you too, is like, how do we control human behavior? And we can't control, or just business behavior and their desire to get the trash out and move on. I noted a few things that I've heard throughout our meetings that are, to the extent we can, those teeth, enforcement, restrictions, signage, road improvements. Cheryl, that goes to the diverters and other considerations, clear communications with haulers, continue the current patrolling. Waste Connections and Randy and his crews do a ton of work already. And that's me observing as a neutral facilitator. There's a lot of work that's already happening and that will continue. We've heard Randy say. And then some, those road improvements or road modifications, left turn lanes and things that make sense based on updated traffic studies. So we have a slide, I think, that covers some of this. Let's kind of continue down, Jeff and Cassie, if you have anything else. And then I want to get to that next slide and think about what our recommendation looks like. But Chris, anything else? Yeah. Just thinking about your neighborhood, knowing that, haulers do use it. Right, Jeff?
Thank you. Couple of questions. We covered the routes. My one thought was, is there, or a concern I was going to raise is, it looks like the proposed route is coming in on Erie Parkway. As I said earlier, you're primarily envisioning that as like local haul. So the transfer trucks coming in wouldn't have to cross that little bridge close to 287.
Wait, sorry, which route you?
So on the orange route, the
Mm.
Erie Parkway route.
Yeah.
If you head past 119th, you eventually get onto that tiny little bridge that crosses just before the junction with 287. So we wouldn't be envisioning heavy truck traffic there, would we?
Only
No
the
more so than there already is.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no different from today.
Okay.
That I don't think we can really legislate. Wait, I don't think we can
No,
do anything about
uh,
that.
And the big haulers, the big transfer trucks we're envisioning coming in State Highway 7,
to
across,
I-25.
up, down.
Yeah,
and-
exactly.
And the vast majority of the trucks, I think, on this orange route would originate within the town of Erie.
Yeah.
On the east side of that tiny bridge.
Yeah, okay, cool, thank you. Just echoing, I think, I like the proposal that we not only include that we designate a left turn lane on 5 south onto 6 east. It might be worth at least stop sign, if not signalizing, but I think town engineers can look at that and propose something that meets some of the safety things we've been talking about.
Jeff, didn't we hear them talk about that, saying something about a roundabout there? I know I heard the word roundabout. I thought they were talking about that intersection. I'm not sure.
Today roundabout? Today?
No, in previous meetings, I know somebody from the
It was-
town was talking about the possibility of a roundabout at 5 and 6.
Scott, that was in the second meeting and that was presented by Miguel. So in the documents that they sent us, it was actually already built in there as far as an envision of what they were going to do. So it
So
was in there.
that should eliminate the issue of left turns and stuff at that intersection. It's just people in Colorado need to learn how to navigate through roundabouts.
Okay, roundabout option. Again, we're not gonna get into the weeds, so I'll try to practice that. Jeff, continue on.
Just one other sort of clarifying point. We keep talking about 65% of the traffic being account holders. Of that 65%, how much of that represents the big transfer trucks coming in? I mean, do transfer trucks are they primarily account holders?
Yes.
Okay.
account holders are gonna be, you know, the big trucks. And then you're also gonna have the residential trucks, the front loaders, roll-offs and things like that. Those are all account holders.
Yeah.
The big
Commercial
trucks
vehicles.
probably make up out of that maybe 40%. You know, I think there's, this, if you look at the size of the truck, they're much bigger and that percentage would be bigger, but the number of trucks, they're probably about 35 to 40%
Okay.
of that number.
I appreciate that. And the reason I was bringing that up is, again, you know, we're talking about safety concerns and who's going to be interacting with these vehicles. If the biggest of the big trucks, the ones that we're most concerned about, are account holders and are going to be held accountable to your recommended route, that feels like it covers, that hits our goal of mitigating the most impactful traffic. So I like that answer.
And one point that Sherry had brought up when you were talking about the signage and all that, I want her to know that there'll be 4 new signs out there probably by the end of next week or the week after that. They're in the process of being made. But they are to limit trucks on County Road 6 at both ends, you know, up by I-25. It'll be replacing the one that's up there, which is hardly legible anymore. And then it'll also be right there at County Road 6 and 7. And then there'll be 2 more, one off of Highway 7, because when they built that new stretch of the double lane, they took that sign down and I have no idea where it's at. So I'm gonna replace that one about going down County Road 7 and then coming down 7 to where you get to 6. There'll be a signer that they can't go down County Road 7.
Thank you, Randy.
those-
Yeah.
But at least then we can see how it works.
I do have a question for you, Randy, before you disappear from the screen.
Is it quick, Cheryl?
Yeah, as far as those signs, is there any way to like put big flags to grab their attention or even like a solar flash and blinking light, just like we do to inform people of new stop signs or traffic changes? Is there something that we can do?
There is
Just-
something you might be able to do, Sherry, but these signs are already in process of being made.
Okay, so how do we do it then? Will you be working with us? Can we work with you on that? For the additional stuff to add to the sign?
So I'd like to try the signs first and see if those work, Sherry. And if we need to add something else to it, I'd be more than happy to work with you.
Okay, because one of the things is, what about photo radar?
Okay.
Is that, to throw it out there and I'm
we'll
gonna
follow
gonna
up
stop.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you,
like
Randy.
photos of taking pictures of these people, because by the time, even when Lisa said she went down there, by the time you see it,
We want to finish hearing from Jeff and then, but I'm noting the concern around making sure that the signs actually get followed. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Last point, and this is more a parking lot item for a future conversation. We've talked about road profiles and other things and how we ensure that the Frico ditch and the dairy and those impacted infrastructure and businesses and homes on 7 are taken into account. I think it would be good for the task force to also hear about the planning process for the development there as it continues and what impact that would have on road engineering on 7. When that, when they eventually get to that phase, what does that engineering process look like? So we have comfort that the road will be designed to accommodate those needs. Also, as part of that conversation, awareness about the extraction project for 26 wells, basically right there, both from the potential traffic impact and from the environmental impact. Just because, if we're talking about that, I don't think it makes sense for us to talk about landfill traffic in isolation from all the water trucks and frac fluid trucks and everything else driving into that same spot.
So future conditions
Yeah.
being accommodated by and kind of the
Or even
iterative
just the
nature.
process for how those future conditions would be considered so that we have confidence that our recommendation isn't going to be for naught.
Yep.
I agree. Also, Jeff, another thing to add to that is the sand trucks. The weight shakes our house when they're illegally driving down our road. So that's another thing to add to the list, not just the water and all the other things that are going to be going on with those fracking sites, but the sand. That's like the most detrimental to our roads and our home, the foundations. So
these recommendations not standing on their own, but living a life beyond just the landfill, yeah.
But
Okay.
we'll probably
Thanks,
know
Jeff.
more about the Draco proposal at our next meeting. I think
Okay.
that hearing's the 28th.
Yeah.
Is that something that would help the task force, just understanding the context of these recommendations?
We can
Within-
spend the
What's-
next hour talking about the oil and gas development, but
What, what's the Draco development?
is it 26 proposed wells
Oh.
north of landfill?
Okay.
Sort of adjacent to the Fraco ditch, north of the liquid handling hub. That'll go to hearing before the state the 28th of August. They have their permits from Weld County. The town is active in those discussions.
Okay, so I would hope that as they're building that, they're gonna take into consideration the safety, if Waste Connections is trying to build their bridge over Frico to make everything happen, that they're all, because of the, just
Cheryl,
all
Yep,
the
that
weight.
was Jeff's recommendation too, just, this
Yeah.
is not, this doesn't live alone, this lives within the context of everything else going on. So that's noted. Thank you, Cheryl, and thanks, Jeff. Cassie?
I
last but
do.
not least.
I have one final thought for, for Mark and for Randy. Okay, for your account holders, is there any way to enforce, like, for example, to reduce left-hand turns? They're coming in all entirely off of I-25. Obviously, they're gonna have to turn left to get down to 6, but in one way, out the other, so they're making right-hand turns, just a thought. And then that to, for Cheryl's recommendation, would cut the traffic in half near the dairy farm, because they're not going both directions. Even if you could enforce it for part of the account holders, it was just a thought.
It's an interesting thought,
Mhm.
something that we should look at.
Yeah. It would kind of split it up still, even though everybody's still coming in from the north.
Just so I understand, I mean, if the trucks are coming in off of I-25, they're gonna make a left-hand turn.
Exactly,
Right.
right. There's no way to avoid that.
Yeah, there's no way to avoid that. Then they get onto 6, but you're talking about, okay, so when they get out, is there a better route for them to exit? So they're just making right-hand turns?
Yeah,
or-
because I mean, obviously they'll
Why?
turn left back onto 6, but
Yeah.
then they'll make a right on 5 and then a right back
Yeah.
onto Erie Parkway.
I think that's something that we should think about.
Yeah,
I mean, we need to think that through,
right.
but from a safety standpoint, maybe that's something that the transportation folks can opine on and you
And I
know.
know, again, hard to enforce, but
Well, I don't know, we can get quite clever on inbound and outbound.
Yeah.
We can guide that traffic to make a turn left or a turn right coming back out of the facility. So I'm less that I think we can control. Question is that the safest option? So
I know it's still routing trucks past the high school, but they'll then hopefully mostly
exactly,
be
they would
turning
go make a
right.
right turn
Exactly,
and then
yeah.
straight back to
Yeah.
25. Okay, well, that's actually a really good thought.
Can the proposed haul route get too complicated? Or you can communicate whatever
Well,
you
I
need?
mean, Randy will tell you,
All right.
I'll tell you from Randy, is the customers that Jeff is speaking to, which is the majority of the customers, and let's face it, the larger trucks, those trucks that are likely to be more impactful than the others,
Mhm.
they're coming in several times a day, many of them, and certainly a few times a week. So first time, sure,
Right.
they'll make a mistake, but they get into a pattern,
Mhm.
right? So.
Well, along those lines, I mean, it brings to mind the divergent diamond at McCaslin and
Oh, man.
36.
That's what I was thinking, the diversion.
People have figured it out. I mean, who's to say that the inbound lane has to be the right lane coming into the landfill? If you make the exit,
People figure it
A
out really
left lane.
quickly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
And so I think a theme is, we don't know yet what's safe,
Yeah.
but and Michael, I don't want to kind of move too fast beyond your genuine concern around, and everyone's really, are we trading one kind of unsafe situation for another? And I don't think we know yet, but at this high level of what's best for the community and for residents and neighbors, would you be comfortable with a commitment to study the issue and to be adaptive as needed?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
So I want to test a few things with you all and make sure we're not missing anything, because what Kearns and West is doing on our end is drafting this into recommendations, very draft, just to give you all something to respond to that we'll probably bring to you between the 6th and the 7th meeting. And so what might go into that recommendation is a commitment to some of these pieces that divert some of the traffic, mitigate some of the traffic. What I added, I wrote down some themes here. We're balancing the
Can
traffic, we're
we-
dispersing it, we're trying to mitigate some of the known and perceived or potential future safety hazards or risks.
Morgan, real fast, I can't see the list at all. It's totally cut off of my screen.
And I'm gonna read it out loud because I don't know how to, unless I move it right behind me. Oh, here.
That's perfect. That's great. Thank you. Okay.
Have a wizard. Okay. Can you all see it? Cassie, can you see it? Okay. This is my, this is a bulleted list, but if we're thinking about a recommendation, it's to follow what we saw with the red bubbles, but with an emphasis on a potential for road improvements. And here's the left-hand turn, left lanes, new left lanes, reducing left turns, you know, the Superior example, a commitment to studying the issue and committing to keeping people safe, you know, for lack of a better set of words right now, just committing to some of the roadway improvements that respond to new traffic patterns. Enforcement is a big theme. Restrictions, if as a restrictions or a limit on accessing the landfill if the signage and the suggested routes aren't followed. Communication with haulers, which I know Waste Connections already does, but all of this kind of rides on good communication. Continuing the current patrolling or just the current efforts to inform and patrol the area. What did I miss? Signage. So these fall within different themes, but the big ones are road improvements based on data, enforcement and restrictions, and then signage and communication. So the outward piece, kind of the internal Waste Connections piece, and then the cooperation with the town. So that was a lot. And what you see on the screen also has pieces of the recommendation. So routes to avoid, the sensitive pieces, and then safety, maintenance, and care, which I think can be addressed through a lot of these. So all that said, if we drafted a draft recommendation based on these commitments, these principles, I want to honor one more time just what we've heard from Cheryl and others is what does that enforcement look like? But a commitment to enforcement and a commitment to honoring this, I think, is something we can write down and sign off on. So with that, Cassie, I might just, or Lisa, go ahead.
One more thing that comes to mind, and it might, I don't know if this will work for your customers, meaning the landfill customers, but is there a way to restrict time of access? So for example, when we know we have the most traffic with people going to work and going to school, and it would address some of Michael's concerns about students driving to school in the morning, is there any way that we could say to avoid that time of day? And it would also be, because we get a lot of commuters in and out on that stretch of Erie Parkway from I-25 to Highway 7. And it's probably the time of day that they need to, your customers need to
Well,
come in, but
I'd say a couple of things. I think it's going to be, I don't think that we could. So let me answer it this way. Truck routing to serve this community, other communities, is a complicated process. And different truck systems have different objectives. Some are picking in residential, some are in commercial, some are industrial. And the time that they're doing their routes is largely a function of permit, like you can't go into an HOA until such a time. And that driver's got to he's got a job or she's got a job to do that day. And so when they're when their truck fills up, they need to head out. So it's dictated as a function of need among the communities on collection and when they can start their route based on restrictions into certain communities. The other thing is, you know, for trucks that are, say, collecting in urban Denver, they need to be in there early and they will tend to pack out, so have a full load pretty early in the morning. So I'm saying all this to say that it's because of the factors involved in routing, it's difficult for us to say, hey, guess what? Between 7:30 and 8:30, you're not going anywhere. You need to park, you know. So the good news, I suppose, is that incoming customers are distributed fairly evenly across the entire day anyway. Just naturally, that's the nature of the business. There doesn't tend to be that big slug that comes in. If it is, it may be around 11 o'clock. Is that where you get the highest traffic?
And you're the experts, that's why I was asking.
Yeah, well, he is. I'm just, yeah.
Usually we have a pretty busy first thing in the morning. You know, at 6 o'clock, we'll have quite a few transfer trailers. We'll have a lot of, the trucks that have been working at night, you know, the front loaders, things like that, they'll come in. After that first rush, things generally even out. We'll have a later morning rush and then we'll have a mid-afternoon. That's when they're coming off their routes. Those are usually the smaller trucks. The bigger trucks are really consistent with, it takes them 45 minutes to make their turn or whatever it is, you know, but there and back. So once they come in the morning, they dump and they go on their way, that evens out. Because they usually load all the trucks first thing in the morning and they're all leaving at the same time.
Okay.
So when they go back, they load, they come back out. So it will get fairly consistent. The problem with setting a time is that if you try to say, okay, you can't come in between 8 and 9:30, you're gonna have to extend the day for those trucks to be able to get rid of what's on their transfer station floor.
Mhm.
So now you're asking, well, can we stay open till 7 o'clock at night? That's gonna irritate neighbors.
Okay.
You know, so there's some give and take. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's probably not the most logical thing to do based on, you know, routing of the trucks. You know, when the trucks come in and out, you know, there's, you know, you can open a facility, you know, 24-hour day and have them all come in at night, but that's not gonna solve the problem.
We can ask a few questions like,
Yeah.
you know, about, and look, this may not work either. If we were to open a little bit earlier, so before the high schoolers are getting up and active and getting into school, so that initial rush actually happens before schooling window, if you like, if that makes a difference or not. But then to Randy's point, then, okay, so now the landfill's open an hour earlier. Is that the best thing? Is
No,
that-
absolutely not.
Says
Now
no.
you're having trucks coming in even
It's like
earlier.
from the heavens. It's
But
like,
they're not going on your street anymore, so.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, creative
But
thoughts,
still, they're gonna be waking somebody up.
but you're in Virginia now.
No.
So is there anything, so the three themes within the recommendation would kind of describe our process. A lot of the concerns that people brought and had an impact on the recommendations, the routes to avoid, the sensitive areas, the suggested new hauling routes, and then everything that goes with it. So my question, I don't want to go person by person. I want to move on to the land stuff if we can, but the three main themes I've heard in no order are enforcement, safety, and being adaptive. And then the considerations and directions and recommendations are within those kind of buckets and themes that I mentioned. Anything missing? Missing. Anything that you're like, oh, I don't like that. I don't want to put my name.
I question, what about time frame?
Time frame.
Yeah.
Good question. And that might
Thank
be part of the enforcement piece and the adaptive piece and the enforcement piece too. So can I note that, Cheryl? Just
Okay. Thank you.
Did we ever get an updated accident report for County 5 with high school students and entry traffic on County 5? I know we had asked for that at one point.
Hmm.
that sounds fatal.
All right. Well, I think we won't have to answer that question. Please.
Well, there's at least your.
Let's blame
John,
Scott.
you know if I get
all right.
follow
We'll
up on
we'll
that. I
give it a
don't-
minute.
I
I'm
don't
sure
believe
Gabby
so.
can
I'm not aware.
get us hooked up. If anyone needs a bio break or a cookie or a soft drink, help yourself.
Sorry, the folks online didn't know what happened. The power went out here for a second, so I have to go fix a couple things. 1 second.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be bad to
Scott was
at least
asking about it.
even if it's just like you said.
Go provide some
like,
data
hey,
on
we're on this task force.
accidents on County Road 5 near the high school.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But I think the data were a bit out of date.
Yeah. Okay.
2019, I think it was pretty.
I'd be happy, you know, if we
Uh,
wanted to do that, long to remember.
Yeah.
Go to the pool and say it's a Saturday, we're at, you know, we're at the
That
pool. we're
I'll
at
look
the-
at that, but I don't think
you know,
They always
right,
lag.
you know,
So
we'll-
the crash
we'll be
data
truck
goes
if
from
we
like
have
police
that kind of thing,
reports,
if we wanna sit
gets
down
cleaned
and
up in the
go
state,
about it.
coded, and then comes back out in these 5-year periods. So if you're looking for something like
Can you hear us? We lost power.
sooner, we could always.
Oh, I can hear you just fine.
That's good.
I would imagine.
Okay, we're back.
I think the other thing there's,
We heard from, we're back. We're back.
We can
We
talk
heard
about
from
pub-
Cheryl about timeline. I noted that, and then I honestly don't remember what happened after. Did you ask a question, Jeff?
No.
Did
I did.
Scott was asking.
Yeah, I was asking about crash data.
crash data? Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, that was gathered and shared, right, Colin?
It was old.
Yeah, it was a bit out of date.
Okay.
As it usually is, it lags quite a bit behind. I can let John speak to it, but I don't believe there's revised crash data available.
Yeah, so when it comes to crash data, what happens is that the accident information from police reports gets essentially coded. And a lot of times that process to code them, it causes a lag in terms of the data that we're looking at. So it sounds like the previous data period that was provided is from a period where there hasn't been, there were some changes essentially implemented, and it doesn't reflect the current conditions of the infrastructure. What we could do related to this is we could look at probabilities associated with the types of crashes that would occur in a similar type of roadway classification when adding, subtracting, routing, all those kind of variables are put into place. So earlier there was some discussion about right turns versus left turns. You know, they're conflict points essentially at intersections that you're talking about, and we can assign probabilities to identify what is the impact of the different configurations when it comes to safety at the various intersections along the routes.
So I'll just name, Scott was asking for anything to date that reflects current conditions, and you're offering to do a look ahead, which I think is very interesting. And if we can take you up on that,
Sure.
I think that would just help inform our conversation. But Scott, do you feel like that's enough, or are you still looking for the most up-to-date crash data?
Well, I mean, it would be nice to get updated crash data, but I think as a traffic engineer, if he's able to do a forward-looking and a comparison of what left turn lanes do to mitigate crashes versus roundabouts, or, you know, making a 2-lane left turn, and so that we can add that to our recommendations, it would help solidify why we're asking for a certain routing and why we're asking for the left turn lanes or the right turn lanes, or however we recommend that routing. If he can, as a traffic engineer, he should be able to predict if we do a 2-lane left turn, we'd have this much reduction if there's a semaphore signal versus a 4-way stop.
Yeah,
Is that
maybe I can add one
doable?
more thing.
Yeah, please.
So when it comes to roadways in general and traffic safety, I mean, we drive, we walk, we bike, we understand that there are risks associated with roadways, with especially at intersections where there are conflict points. So the number of when it comes to the design of the roadway and how we design it, safety is the top priority. And any kind of new roadway implementation will meet the latest safety design associated with that particular request. The one thing to consider here is, and this is how crash data is analyzed, is you'd want to reduce the severity of crashes, not the number of crashes. And what I mean by that is crashes are categorized into more severe, say, fatal crashes and injury crashes versus property damage only crashes. And in some of the designs, especially as we look at these alternatives and compare them, the likelihood that we're going to eliminate all crashes, which is our goal, it's not statistically possible. And therefore, what we try to do is, in terms of safety, we try to reduce the severity of crashes so that essentially what we're talking about is if you're getting into a fender bender, minor kind of crash between vehicles, humans are not harmed. But if it's a crash between, a collision between, say, a pedestrian and a vehicle, no matter what size that vehicle is, the pedestrian is typically on the losing end of that particular equation, and that's a kind of severity that we want to measure. So one of the things to consider here is as we go through the process, we could review how to address severity of crashes at the intersections and not just the number of crashes. That would indicate safety in terms of what the plan and the routes would tell us.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really thoughtful. We will welcome that information. If you can do it before the next meeting, great. Otherwise, before October. Well,
Morgan, one thing,
Yep, Cheryl, let me finish my thought. Safety one thing I want to reflect back in the recommendations is just how people perceive safety differently, and it means different things to a lot of us. And I think that's something more subjective that we can capture just to frame a lot of this too. And that's a thoughtful way to approach it. Thank you, John. Yep, Cheryl.
all right, one thing that I'd like to ask John is if he could also include like what the future impact is going to be at the intersection of 6 and 7, because actually that hill coming down 7 from Erie Parkway is more extreme than the hill coming down Road 5. And then I know this is totally off topic from traffic, but one thing that came to mind is the fire safety, because the farther east you go, the less water there is if there's a fire. So like from where my house is, we're a mile away from a fire hydrant. And just to make sure that the engineers and everybody take that into consideration if there's fires from the trash trucks while they're waiting in the staging area.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Like I asked you, are we missing anything? Anything doesn't sit well with you? And then the power went out, I think, but this will get translated into real sentences and paragraphs, and you will have another chance to talk about this. But anything else before we move on to the land use issues? Okay. Yay, good work. Thank you. So that's that. Let me ask Mark or Randy to present. Well, let me summarize the 3 big pieces we'll be talking about. The first is a notch, a horseshoe shaped notch on the western side of the Front Range landfill. That is not currently used for landfill operations. Yet it's owned by Waste Connections, right? Mark, Randy, the land is owned. The second is a potential expansion, and you'll see this on a map that's in front of you, into the southeastern part of the Waste Connections property. And essentially that means expanding operations, more capacity, and a land swap between the land that the Blue Jungle is currently on. There's a map in front of you as well. And that northeastern corner of the current landfill footprint. So moving the maintenance yard, kind of the shop. Mark called it the shop the other day. I think that makes sense to that area. This is a pretty high level map. Oops. Let's talk first about, or just what I asked you all to think about at the end of the last meeting was, were there any other information pieces that you needed to just help think through those 3 items? Some of you reached out with that, those needs. Any other kind of outstanding kind of clarification, information, questions, what the stuff is used for now, things like that? Okay. So let's talk first, just have a bit of discussion around the land swap. And maybe land swap is too crude of a term, but really it means moving the maintenance yard and some of that storage facility to the footprint. And we won't get into specifics, but somehow the town takes ownership of that parcel that the Blue Jungle is on right now and turns it into ideally a public use. So I'm looking for my map here, but the town did come up with a map that describes the area in more detail. It's Cheryl and Scott, we just got these. We'll send them to you as soon as we can. But they show you all in more detail the land that's adjacent to the Blue Jungle. And
And I apologize for the horrific color scheme of this map. That was my fault.
Is it this one?
Yes.
That one, yep.
Yeah, the other one is sort of a location map just to show you
Yep.
where this inset map is.
Yeah, why don't you talk about it, David?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
the various squiggly lines of all sorts of different colors are the trail networks in the area. And the large patches of color, be it green, blue, or gray, are existing or future open space as Parkdale develops. And then the teal half arrow is the Blue Jungle, the Waste Connections parcel. And as you can see, it sort of makes a wedge between the two large areas of open space that the trails currently kind of jog around. So from the town's point of view, that's a pretty attractive property for the open space program.
Are there concerns from anyone? Scott, Cheryl, anyone here? Are there real concerns with the land swap?
Is it the same amount of acreage, basically?
Hold on, Scott, Chris, talk in your mic.
I was just increased traffic on
Mhm.
our roads.
Increase.
Wouldn't it? I mean, I don't know, but aren't there like hundreds of maintenance trucks and?
I think it would substantially decrease traffic because currently those haulage trucks, and Mark and Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, they do their last load at the day at the landfill and then drive down County Line Road to this maintenance facility. Whereas if the maintenance facility was located on the landfill property, they could stay there and not have to make that one extra trip.
Yeah,
I have a question. I have
Just
for you
one on
guys.
increased traffic, and then we'll hop right over to you, Cheryl. Thank you.
It's not a measure to increase the number of trucks or routing, but David's right, that where it benefits is really on the last load of the day, is they don't have to go back out onto the streets again to head down to the Blue Jungle. They would stay internal to the footprint. So that would be the upside. To answer Scott's question, no, it's not even close to equal acreages. It's completely unfair. No, it's, I think the property we own is 3.5 acres and the rectangular piece is more like 8 or so.
So you're in the
Something like-
ballpark, but it wouldn't be a just a straight trading of
Right.
monopoly cards. We'd obviously have both properties assessed for value and there would be just compensation, whichever direction that goes. They have their property's waterfront, ours is larger.
You have 3 bathrooms, they have 2.
At the end of the day, and I won't speak for Waste Connections, but from the town's perspective, this is a rare win-win. Our parcel up in the far northeast corner of the landfill is not particularly useful to the town or to the residents, frankly. And where the Blue Jungle is not terribly convenient to Waste Connections. And it's just a rare mutually beneficial proposition to say, hey, we've got, 2 green properties and you've got 2 yellow properties. Why don't we go on ahead and make a trade? And then we can start building hotels. I haven't played Monopoly in a while.
Thank you,
Okay, thank you.
David. Thanks, Chris. Cheryl, go ahead.
Okay. First thing is, I understand and it makes sense to me.
Hey, Cheryl, you're breaking up a little bit. Could you turn your camera off and start your comment again?
These are your employees. You turn my Are you catching me?
We didn't catch any of that, unfortunately.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Start video.
Keep your video off. That might help. With your
Uh-oh. I don't know how to turn my video off. Oh no. So you're not hearing anything?
We hear you right now, Cheryl. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll do this fast and I'll get lost. One thing is, can you enforce the employees when they're leaving or entering to get into the Blue Jungle that they come a different route other than going down Road 7, because that's just gonna add more traffic? And also making sure that they don't go down Road 6 or the restricted arena area. And then the other question I have for you is just, are we putting the cart before putting the horse before the cart? Because if the FICO ditch doesn't get approved with the engineers and building that bridge, then there's not really a real benefit to committing that I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking that they're going to be forced to get back out on the road again. But my one question is if we can make sure that the employees don't come down Road 7 to get into the Blue Jungle, and the same thing, the employees come down Road 5.
Do you mean like in their personal vehicles when they commute to work?
Yes, please.
Well,
That's a good thought. I think that one's a little trickier, Cheryl, but
right.
it's noted.
They would
Yeah.
be just members of the public acting, and I mean, no one can tell you how to commute to work.
Okay. What about because where that road is right now?
Right.
I'm sorry?
Your concern is more traffic, and maybe that
Yeah.
fits in the adaptation piece. And if there are
Well-
trends, there's open communication between Waste Connections and residents along 6.
Yeah, and what about WAPO? Because not only does Waste Connections have to deal with the approval of building the bridge over FRICO, but there's also WIPO where all those telephone lines are, and power lines, that run right where that proposed road is coming from the Blue Jungle to the bridge.
So Cheryl, I'm going to put that into the adaptation and kind of safety piece that I think is important to honor in the recommendations. Any concerns about the uses of the land and swapping those uses just in the interest of the town and Waste Connections? No.
No, I guess I've already said the safety of the fire and all that, so I can't think of anything right now.
No, those are really important. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Bring up a good point that obviously in order to affect a lot of the changes and improvements we're talking about, it requires a whole host of approvals. Local, state, federal, FRICO. So there's lots of hurdles that shouldn't necessarily interfere with the plan.
Yeah, and the intent.
Yeah, the intent.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Cheryl. Any other comments or about concerns? I'm concerned because, yeah, Michael.
Well, I don't really have any concerns with the land swap. I think it sounds like it makes a lot of sense. You have a reduction in end of day traffic, you have reduction in emissions from the trucks from having to do that at the end of the day. The drivers will be driving to either location anyway, so that really doesn't reduce, on the front end in the mornings, but it does reduce, your afternoon emissions. And if you have ozone days, that's when you're worried about afternoon emissions, right? So those are all valuable things, and increasing, open space and trails is always a valuable community benefit, which is a plus, especially for all that new development over there in Parkdale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
Then we just have to convince Lafayette to move their wastewater treatment plant, and we'll have the whole.
Good luck with that.
Their brand
Good
new
luck with that.
wastewater
Yes,
treatment plant.
exactly.
Thank you, David. Okay. I'll move on. Scott, anything else?
I just think that I agree with what Michael's saying. I just think the important thing is how we sell it to the public that, as Mark was saying, if compensation needs to be addressed, if there's a difference in land valuation, to make sure the public feels like we're not giving away something that the town owns without fair return.
Yep, I noted that. I don't know if you saw our flip chart. I noted that, just clear public communications, because I think this is a general piece of just something I noticed is we all kind of came in with our own perceptions, right or wrong, about landfill operations. And I think we've all learned a lot about actual landfill operations. But if the public communications piece isn't there and fostered and
we have the opportunity to do that through the newsletter that goes out with the utility bill. that education is, the more we can get out, the more transparent we'll make this, the easier it'll be for everybody involved, all the stakeholders.
Good, thank you. All right, on to the notch. Can everyone picture the notch or see it on the map in front of you? Mark, David, I know there is what's the right word? A gas well not used anymore?
I
Plug?
think, there is a former oil and gas.
And is that
location.
why it's notched out of
That
the
is
permitted area?
The reason for the notch.
Yep.
And I've opened conversations with the Energy and Carbon Management Commission staff, some of their engineers on what degree there is concern about putting, a couple hundred feet of trash atop those wells. What the state expressed to me is that those wells are as modern as you can get as far as the plugging procedures, and that particular operator went essentially a bit above and beyond required plugging procedures. I personally still have a bit of concern, not for anything in probably my lifetime, but if in 200 years those wells were to be leaking, how would they be accessed? I don't think that's anything that can't be overcome with engineering, but it's something that we should be thoughtful of in the eye of the town. The other concern from the town about filling in the notch would be that when there was active deposition on that western slope and especially the southern slope, but we certainly saw a lot more concerns and complaints from residents. And so reactivating that west side would probably cause some degree of consternation, though there isn't a neighborhood directly adjacent to the notch, as opposed to when you work on the southern part of the landfill toward Vista Ridge. So those are the town's concerns about filling in the notch. I know at Waste Connection, I know you guys think it'll look really nice as a smooth pyramid. I like a little bit of undulation in my topography, but that's personal preference. But those pretty minor concerns really from the town on when it comes to the notch.
Well, that's a good segue, Mark. Randy, anything you want to share more about in terms of your interest in the notch?
Look, we share David's interest in the abandonment of that boring and maybe, the state is saying that they use more modern methods. We will want to vet that when it comes down to it before we put any liner systems there. We'll want to verify that it was properly abandoned, and there's a good grout seal down a substantial depth and that it has full integrity. And there are engineering systems to be able to assess that. So that's something that can actually get incorporated into a construction quality assurance plan. So before you do any development, you have to address or visit this item. We're not afraid of that. That's not a concern of ours, but it does need to be part of the engineering process. There's no question about it. In terms of the notch, also known as the horseshoe, I actually agree with David on, I'm not a big fan of these engineered looking smooth slopes because they look engineered and not natural. And although we've drawn them in concept as this straight continuous slope, I would like to suggest that maybe we do build some more geomorphic shape into that portion of the landfill while we still have the opportunity because it's not built. I would say the same about that internal expansion where the water tanks are too, actually. So just because it shows today these conceptual lines, I speak to both those development areas as why don't we get smart about the look? And this is the time to do it at the, at this stage. And so I'd love to work with the town on, maybe we can throw out a couple of alternative geomorphic sort of final completion scenarios and run some photo simulations to show how that looks. Because we have done photo sims based on the concept. and it's fairly unremarkable, mostly because depending on, no matter where you take the photo from, it largely doesn't look like it makes a great deal of difference because you end up with the same height and you're kind of filling in a corner. But I think we can do, I mean, my point is I actually think we can do better than that. And so that is a huge win for us. We may lose a little bit of airspace here and there, but I am 100% on board with David on this because it's something that the homeowners need to will look at for the rest of the days, and this is the time to change it. We do have some hurdles to jump with the state. They're used to that sort of engineered finish. And there are aspects of drainage, because when you create sort of lumps and what have you, that forms drainage pathways. So we need to be smart about how we do that. But those are that's engineering. I'm excited about that, actually. I love that David brought it. This was not rehearsed, but I actually
Sorry,
like
Mark,
that
I didn't.
because that you know, there's an opportunity to actually change a few of these slopes and actually make it look more natural than engineered. So that's what I would suggest that we do. And I don't mind if you put that down, Morgan, as an action item.
You said it, it's official. But just the aesthetics are important.
I mean, it'll be the largest mountain in Weld County.
But that won't change regardless of what we do.
Right.
There's just the consideration of the abandoned well, and we don't have all the information completely informed about that, but Mark said sometimes things. You know, we can learn more. And
Yeah.
those connections could learn more. That's a component of this aesthetics, a natural look. And this is just what we're asking is, you know, it's an expansion of the permitted area with these considerations, so.
So how long do you anticipate it will take to fill in the horseshoe?
Approximately a year and a half, maybe less than. Well, because it's about 2 million yards.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it depends on, when we get approved to do it, and how long down the road we start, but physically get it done. You're probably looking at a year to 18 months. Because you're doing that, when you do a cell, it's not just a little cell. You know, it could be 16 acres, and that would incorporate that horseshoe. So you develop that whole area as you fill in that horseshoe. But
let's be clear on that, and I'm not being clear on the answer. So what, in terms of how much additional space filling in the horseshoe, just assuming we don't get let's assume we don't get creative with slopes. So basically maximum, it's about a year and a half filling. But whether we go with these expansions or whether we just go home and forget all of this and just go with permitted, we're still going to be filling there for years.
Right.
It comes down to building out those cells in a phased way to minimize the visual impacts. And that's the other part that we committed to do early on, is the phased development of the site such that it minimizes visual impacts to the neighbors, and that we prioritize those areas that have the greatest impact first, and then go more, you know, internal to the site later. So the phase development is important, but I think the look by filling in the notch and creating more geomorphic slopes, the end product will be a better product.
Thanks, Mark. What else, Lisa?
No, I was just thinking when you said the public was, I mean, that's a very visible side of the landfill. And frankly, when you drive up Sheridan to see the other proposed infill expansion area there, you don't see that as much. You see the wells that are there.
Correct.
You know, you don't even, you could hardly see the water tanks unless you really look.
Right.
So I was just thinking of impact and public communication and visibility of how long people would see you working there. I mean, if it was 5 to 10 years, that would be a long time to have to deal with that.
Well, I think Mark said without saying, where the current entrance and office barn and infrastructure are.
Yeah.
Long-term, that'll also be refuse.
Yeah.
So there will be lengthy deposition in that northwest corner
Mm.
with or without the notch.
Okay.
That probably, look, you're the neighbors. I think that for the most part, that has less visual impact. I'm not quite sure whether some of the newer homes in Westerly, where they'll be able to see that, but I don't know how to get around that because there's going to be filling to the north as well. They're going to see it.
Yeah, it's Sunset, that newest neighborhood.
Right.
So, kind of what it would look like is important, but first, before that is understanding the implications of the abandoned well and potentially covering that, capping it, or not, whatever, filling it on. And then just thought into how it looks and how it stays into being used.
Hey, Morgan, we can't hear you.
Morgan, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I was just kind of summarizing where we are. We've heard about what we need to learn before potentially using that or expanding the permitted area, and then just the importance we heard in a couple different comments on the aesthetics and the visual impacts and communications with the public about what's happening and not happening. Any other considerations for folks? I mean, really the recommendation would be go forward. We support going forward with this, with these considerations, or perhaps we don't because, you know, this is more of a concern. So we're not really voting, but we're thinking through what it would take to potentially.
I've got something to say. Can you hear me okay, Morgan? I don't know whether you can even see me.
Hear you.
Okay. So we're talking about all the access and bike routes and everything connecting, let's see, from 6 to 4. Is there any way that anybody can put something in where the public coming from Erie on the other side, like on my side of the road, can still access to get into all of the nice stuff that's eventually going to be there from Waste Connections? You know, like sidewalks or something,
Say that
or
in
bike trails?
along 6 or providing you access to 5.
Just multimodal connection between 7 essentially and those access points at the corner of 5 and 4.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'd say, probably into the single track
Yep.
area as well. I think that's
So off-street connections between essentially
Yes.
and kitty corner to. Mhm. Okay.
Yeah. So we're not cut off from the community.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Where's the closest public parking area for access to trails in this part of the world here right now?
the single track.
Yeah.
Yep, the single
track, County
Road
Road
5
5, County Road 6.
And there's
There's
a
a
few
public
parking
parking area, yeah.
spots there. So that
Mhm.
that for Cheryl's neighborhood, that's the closest place. If they wanted to drive to get access to trails, that would be the closest.
Correct.
Okay.
And as Westerly develops, you can see the beginning of the spine trail.
Yeah.
It'll mirror much of the ditch through here, and this will all be open space with presumably there'll be parking access to get to that too.
Kind of the same for ranch eggs and, you know, Chris, folks over there, just, I mean, everyone really accessing that with some on-street and off-street improvements.
That
So Morgan, I just need a
may be more of a
clarification.
town
Are we talking?
consideration than us. I know that the planning and development's mission is to make sure that there's connectivity
Mhm.
between all the neighborhoods to the
Mhm.
spine trails. So
And this recommendation could kind of endorse that. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No, I just need clarification on the recommendation we're looking at right now. Is that just on the notch, or are we talking about the whole expansion?
What's the notch?
We're just talking
think
about the
just the
notch right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, what do you think, Scott?
Okay.
No, I mean, my concern obviously is covering the abandoned well. Now, if we can get engineering to develop a way that there would be a way to monitor if it does start leaking, at which point, how is it going to be addressed, and have a plan in place ahead of time rather than after the fact when it does start leaking. Oh crap, now what do we do? Want an emergency plan in place, and very clearly delineated responsibility areas and who pays for it. You know, if all of a sudden they realize there's something underneath. I mean, I was at that house in Frederick or Firestone that blew up from the gas well that had been abandoned and capped, and it leaked into their basement, where 3 people died, or 2 people died, and one was seriously injured. So this is not a maybe, it happens, and we need to be proactive about making sure that the people in the area understand that we're looking at that.
Yep.
I agree
I
completely.
noted
Scott.
emergency action planning into our list of items here. So thank you, Scott. That's a
Okay,
really,
this is a pie in the sky thing, real quick. It'd be awesome. I know that Vista Ridge did it when I was on the ESAP committee for open space and 25 years ago, but they actually out in that Vista Ridge area have horse areas. And those of us that are out there on 6 have horses. I don't know, just a pie in the sky thing for everybody to think about and brainstorm while they're building all of these bicycle trails and everything, something about for equestrians.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the
and
Vista Ridge horse area is actually probably going to be developed into housing very soon.
okay.
Oh, no, figures.
Cheryl, some recreation, kind of outdoor public uses, that could fall under community benefits too, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
You know, our approach here is to move forward in drafting a recommendation that you respond to. I'm not hearing anyone with severe concerns. There is a legitimate actionable task here to understand what the concerns may be or what the action planning is around that well. But any other, and the visual impacts here are important. But if there was a recommendation kind of recommending to move forward with that, I think it does carry weight if some of these items are attached to it. Anything that's missing?
No, I have no problem with it.
Okay.
David's point of what happens when you do add all the landfill on top of it, if you're looking at just this contour map, you're only talking about 20 or 30 feet of additional material on top of it. So if you're having to plug down 300 or 400 feet already, getting the drill rig an extra 20, 30 feet probably wouldn't be a major impact for them to address that.
Yeah, it might be as simple as welding a piece of stick-up casing
Yeah,
on the existing
exactly.
casing, to keep it accessible at the surface, so you wouldn't have to excavate. And that would give an easy point to monitor. Again,
Yeah.
everything's possible in the world of engineering, with adequate resources. Waste Connections is committed to safety on this issue. They've heard the town's concerns. Like I said, I've worked with the state engineers, on this, so nothing to overcome. And if the task force wants to recommend infilling that, I would request that be added to the recommendation, that potential concern be considered.
So I wrote down
that
commitment to
reasonable,
safety, which I think goes without saying, but
From an engineering standpoint, is that even possible to put the liner down and still have that vent pipe coming up through it? Is there a way to seal that in there?
No, one could access it from, horizontally, but I don't think that's going to be the right engineering solution. I think that one needs to confirm that you've got full integrity through an extensive vertical extent of that annulus, and verify that before you put in a liner system, as opposed to trying to think of some seal through a liner system. That tends to be a weak spot. Sure. Anytime you do a penetration, no matter what type of a liner system you do, that ends up being the weakness. So, this is something that I think we'd want to engage with the Colorado School of Mines on, who have got a great deal of expertise in this area. They're probably not the only organization that's got a lot of skill in this, but
And the operator, whose well was this? Was this a?
well, it's now Civitas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was custom before?
Extraction.
Yeah, I want to say it
right?
was an extraction.
Yeah.
well.
okay.
Yeah, exactly. They're all one family.
They're all
Big
Yeah.
could be
conglomerate.
beneath
The
it, yes.
themes in it's behind you, behind this right now, but the themes for that notch discussion, I noted, again, that gives us something to start to put on paper. Just a quick agenda check. We're not going to talk about community benefits, but you have slides and images in your slide deck that describe, I think, a similar endeavor to expand community benefits on, is it an existing landfill, Mark Randy Champ? It's still in operation?
We're not talking about the other.
we're gonna talk about expansion. I wanna, yeah. it's-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's-
Champ is
yeah,
the other one.
But
Yeah.
it's in operation still?
Yeah, it actually will be in operation 100 years from now, probably.
Okay, all right, so in operation, lots of cool things happening. That's your opinion, cool or not. I think they're neat, but we're gonna start our next meeting with the community benefits discussion. So for another 7, 8 minutes, we're gonna move into that expansion topic. That's a bigger one. You'll see, you know this, but on your map, it's moving the permitted area to the southeast. That notched area in yellow is a proposed expansion area. There are existing water tanks there. The proposal is to move them. Those are kind of the town's business. So, yeah, David, what am I
I'll-
missing that
Well, I
we
can,
know? Yeah,
I can speak from, on behalf of the Public Works Department, and frankly, the Utilities Department. Um, the water tanks, we are not opposed to their relocation to this proposed spot to the southeast. It will certainly serve the town. It actually mitigates a few minor pumping issues. It's a slightly superior location. The tanks aren't in decrepit shape, but they could also benefit from replacement. They're not at end of life, but new tanks would obviously last much longer. From a community impact sense, this particular part of the landfill, as we've sort of touched on, is not the most visible part of the landfill. This doesn't increase the overall height of the landfill. Its final design wouldn't, from nearly every vantage point, wouldn't be significantly different. So from municipal staff's point of view, I don't think we have a lot of opposition or concerns about this proposed expansion, other than input from the community. That would be our major concern is from residents.
and high level, would the heights be the same? Is it just, pardon me, is all this, but it's kind of
Yes,
go out?
the landfill would not be any higher than essentially it is today. But, I mean, obviously in that area that you see in purple, it is higher. Because it's essentially at natural ground surface today. So that would be the difference. We've run some photo simulations. I don't know. I think that I'm looking at Colin, but he's not looking at me. That Jason Edwards with Weaver Consultants, has he shared a whole bunch of photo simulations with you? If he hasn't,
We'll
I
have
would-
those for next meeting.
Let's,
Let's
but
do
I would
that.
like to share them with the task force and the public, of course,
That would be great.
in advance, so that they can at least take a look at from different vantage points on it. And what it shows, just so you know, is existing conditions as at maybe a couple of years ago, permitted final conditions. So if we do none of this, permitted final, and then proposed. So it'd be for each vantage point, 3 photos, 3 photo sims. And so the task force may say that's whatever, you didn't think about this location or that location, that's fine, we can run more. We try to be smart about it, but we may not have been. So, but we did do that, and that was obviously a very formative step for us, because we know that's the first or second question any member of the public is going to have, which is, what does it look like?
And
What's
one
it
of the
gonna look
comments
like?
we got was this will cause more odor. I mean, it was a comment, I'm sure you've all, I mean, that's really top of mind for people. Will it be noisier? Will it be smellier? And I'm saying this objectively, people are still worried about that. So I want us to think through what this means for the neighbors too.
From, from most people's perspective, it's going to be, how much life does it add?
Yeah.
That's the
How long will this-
fundamental
yeah,
question. And so from an airspace standpoint, we committed early to play around with maybe some shapes which may reduce what I'm about to say. But I believe in this expansion area, it's plus or minus 9 million yards.
Mhm.
compare that to what we have permitted remaining, which is 39 million. But it does add 9. So for transparency, it adds more space, which is so, but it is internal to the property. So from a, you know, odors and, it has no direct effect on the number of vehicles per day that comes in. What it does affect is how long over time trucks do come in, right? So that's essentially what it's about. From an engineering and environmental standpoint, I think that we feel good that we can engineer and science our way through and continue to run the site the way that you've seen it run today, with the sorts of continued improvements that we're committed to doing on gas capture and those sorts of things.
And from an environmental standpoint, whether the landfill expands or not, doesn't alter the waste produced. And that trash will go somewhere, whether it's here or a different facility or a landfill that hasn't yet been permitted. So I just want
It does increase the CO2 footprint though.
of this particular facility, but not of humanity.
That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about this facility, the concentrated amount in that location.
Yeah, greenhouse gas emissions are a global issue, whether they're emitted in China or distant Weld County or here in Erie.
I think Scott makes a valid point.
Sure.
I think that what we're proving though is that we continue to make strides in our gas capture. This is data that we'd be pleased to share with anyone. We're capturing more every day as we advance more wells. We get smarter about how to do it. There's actually financial benefit for us to do it, if we needed any more reasons. This is an area that as an industry, they need to do a lot better. We're doing very well. The US EPA, who have come and played with us in the last 12 months, will tell you that. They've done a very detailed inspection around these sites and we've had a clean bill of health, but that we're not settling with that. It's not good enough. We can do more. And you know, those are just words, but we are seeing actual factually continuous improvements in that area. So
Yeah, let's.
When you
let's spend our last
when you
couple-
talked about 9 million expansion feet,
yards, yep.
what timeline are we looking at to fill that in?
yeah, again, you know, it's the same, you know, answer as 39 million, which is what's permitted. It's completely a function of how traffic is distributed and how we elect to distribute traffic over the future. So, but to put it in this perspective, you know, if we've got 39 million left and we're adding 9, what's that, 20% plus or minus, something like that,
Okay.
of a space. That's how
But
we look at it in terms of.
So you're talking about photographic simulations of what it will look like both ways. What about a photographic simulation of what it'll look like in process from the south when you're coming up Sheridan? You'll clearly be able to see that. You'll clearly be able to hear the beeping of the tractors and all that stuff that we had with the issue when you were first doing the south end. That will affect people in that area. You'll be able to hear it and see it and smell it.
I think it's quite some distance away from the filling there on the south slope. At least it looks
Well,
like
Scott,
that.
we'll note
Yeah.
that as an action item to think about. And Chris had her hand up and then Jeff. Chris.
Oh, I was just wondering, did somebody say something about gravity is working in favor with the water tanks where they're at now?
Yeah, so Erie has water tanks. We don't have big water towers, because there's enough topography in the town that we've strategically placed these water tanks and others that service the, so that it can be gravity fed. So gravity is what causes the pressure at your tap. To get the water to the tanks, it has to be pumped there. And the current pumping system is not the most ideally designed. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
It's functional.
Jeff,
but it
and
can
then
be-
we'll do some closing thoughts. We're almost at time. Jeff?
Yeah, and more, again, sort of clarification, what I've heard the commitment from Waste Connections is you're going to work, whatever the plan or whatever the proposal, the plan is to work the perimeter so that in time, the last bit of lifespan, the last remaining whatever million yards it is internal to the property. I presume the same policy would be pursued here, that, you know, you would probably work on the western edge and then work on that new expansion in the southeastern corner, and then eventually start to fill in the middle. Does that
Yeah.
feel notionally correct?
In general, that's how we would typically proceed. I haven't thought much further than let's handle that west side of the facility first and get that knocked out. Let's get that knocked out. And then I haven't thought much more through the rest of the phasing. Not that we don't want to. I think if that's part of the exercise here, we're open to input on doing that. And obviously we can provide some engineering input on, you know, from as a practical matter, what makes sense as well, Jeff. I did want to ask one question about the tanks, since you brought it up. Would you be adding capacity if the tanks are moved? Would the town want to increase the capacity of the tanks, or would they be the same?
I don't want to get too far out of my lane, but it's my understanding. So currently there's one like very large and one kind of large. And if the tanks are to be replaced, I think it would make the most sense to replace them with both very large tanks. So I think there would be an increase in capacity, but I'm a little outside of my lane.
Oh, okay.
Well,
We're gonna have more discussion on, yeah, Jeff.
so one further like bullet point for the future. I appreciate that you haven't thought that far ahead. I think what would also help us in understanding what that timing looks like is maybe a peek into planning and development's timetable for the surrounding parcels, just so that we can sort of see, you know, what.
Sure,
When does
I'll-
Westerly Phase 2 start, or when is it anticipated? When does Red Tail Ranch show up back on in front of the planning commission? All those
I
fun
don't think
things.
anyone's going to speculate on Red Tail. I can definitely get information about Westerly. The properties further to the east, essentially the gateway along I-25, that's all
forever.
quite uncertain. And from my understanding, it needs to be developed from the north-south.
Yeah.
Because everything drains to the north. I'm not a water
Well,
wastewater
I'm
engineer,
thinking
but
more, I don't think we need the
Right.
whole
no.
plan. What we
Sure.
need is just sort of
What's going on
visibility,
around
what-
it.
Complicated timeline.
what's adjacent to the
Yeah.
siting question.
We'll try to, we'll gather what we can, what we know,
Cool.
and identify what we don't know.
Thank you.
We need more discussion around this, and I might reach out to each of you just to help us think through what a recommendation should look like. I don't have a good suggestion right now. And this brings to light a lot of the like themes that we've heard around just some of the visual and quality of life impacts. Then we can maybe try and match that up with Waste Connections commitments, or, you know, you had a good idea or note, Jeff, of the phase build out of the potential expansion area. So our next meeting will be hopefully finishing this conversation or getting further into it. And then the community benefits one, which is kind of our visioning fun exercise of what could be. And then wrapping up some loose ends. Okay. Helen, any action items that you noted that we can share right now? I'm putting you on the spot, but.
Let me go through them. So the first one is to look into the timeline for development of the parcels of land kind of adjacent to the site where that visibility might be questioned. The second is around,
Colin, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
oh, sorry. The second is around looking at a photo simulation of what it will look like from the south end as the landfill is being filled in, if that expansion were to go ahead. The third is to just share some of those photo simulations with the landfill task force of the 3 vantage points. I think current, permitted, and proposed were the 3. And those were the action items that I
Yeah,
captured.
so if
from
there
the-
are other things you think about in talking or thinking, let us know. And, you know, we have a lot of people available to help answer questions. So with that, thank you to folks coming from from the public. We appreciate you being here and thank you to all of you for your volunteer time helping us work on this. We appreciate it and stay safe out there.
Thank you.
If-
Yeah.
Can I just make one note? Sorry, before everybody leaves. There is a power outage, as we saw, but apparently quite a bit of town north of us on County Line Road is blacked out right now. So just be careful when you leave, and streetlights may be out and whatnot. So just be cautious of that. We are on generator power, which is why our light came back on.
Okay, thank you, Gabby.
There goes the accident data.
Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks.